A little over a month ago, I received a comment on my Voron Switchwire video asking why anybody would get a bedslinger. For some reason, that comment stuck with me and I chewed on it for a bit. Looking at my current lineup of 3D printers, the majority of them are still i3 style or bedslinger style 3D printers, and there are many more coming out constantly. My Switchwire just clocked a little over 200 hours since the rebuild, primarily printing with ABS, and I've really been enjoying using the RatRig V Minion. The question of why anyone would still get a bedslinger is definitely a fair one to ask, but to write them off altogether or dismiss them as old tech, stating that they are no longer viable, couldn't be further from the truth. In today's video, we are going to explore this. I'm going to share my thoughts on the current state of bedslinger style 3D printers and why to many they are still the perfect 3D printer choice. So with all that being said and without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Massive thanks to MicroSwiss for sponsoring today's video. MicroSwiss manufactures hot ends, extruders, and nozzles for over 30 different 3D printer models and is constantly expanding. I've been running their upgrades on a wide range of Creality printers for over 2 years now and have printed everything from standard PLA to carbon fiber nylon with them. I love that they're based in the US and that all their products are machined in-house. This helps them to maintain the extremely high level of quality that their customers have grown to expect. Another huge perk is that their upgrades are made for specific machines, making them drop-in replacements in most instances. This helps expedite the upgrade process and allows you to get up and running again quickly. Links will be in the description to find out more about the various upgrades they offer or to pick up your own. Before anyone goes down to the comments, let me preface this by stating I do think that Core XY 3D printers are definitely superior to bedslingers. If we put them head to head from a performance standpoint, not having the bed whipping back and forth, which is a large mass, is going to allow for quicker printing and less ringing. For a bit of history, the earliest style of bedslinger 3D printer I could find is the RepRap Mendel. There's a video of the original design as a launch video on YouTube that was uploaded in October of 2009. In my search into the Mendel, I stumbled across a blog post on reprap.org written by the then 20-year-old Joseph Prusa talking about the Mendel and some modifications he made to it, which ended up becoming the Prusa Mendel. It's sort of an interesting read of where Prusa got his bearings, and I will have the blog post as well as the YouTube video to the Mendel launch video in the description below. Since the release of the original Mendel, bedslingers have really evolved. A lot of the original units were made out of laser cut wood or laser cut acrylic, and they were just using off-the-shelf components and nothing that was really specifically made for the application of 3D printing. Now the standard for even the most inexpensive 3D printers is a 32-bit board, aluminum extrusions, a heated bed, which was certainly not always a thing, and much better slicers and firmware, allowing you to just get substantially better reliability out of your 3D printer. On top of that, just about everything on them now has been manufactured specifically for 3D printing. One of the biggest limitations of bedslingers is speed, especially quality when you are printing at higher print speeds. And again, this is due to the y-axis being the bed, which is whipping back and forth for the entirety of the printing process, hence a bedslinger. One of the ways to sort of counter this is to use a lighter weight bed, which typically comes in the form of a heated bed PCB with maybe a very thin sheet of aluminum on top. The plus side of using this over a thick aluminum bed found a lot of times on Core XY 3D printers is that they are substantially lighter. The trade-off to that though is that because they are so thin, they're oftentimes warped from the factory or not perfectly flat, and even if they are flat, given enough heat and cool cycles, the heat will cause the metal to expand and contract, and eventually you'll get divots or pockets somewhere on the heated bed, which can be problematic. This issue has all but been resolved thanks to the evolution of hardware and firmware with the incorporation of mesh bed leveling. With mesh bed leveling, you've got something like an inductive probe or servo that will go around probing a certain number of points on the bed, creating a virtual grid or mesh. Then while your printer is printing, it can use that data to raise or lower the nozzle as needed to basically compensate for any sort of peaks or valleys that might be in your printer's build surface. Of course, having a perfectly flat bed is always going to be better than needing firmware or software to compensate for a imperfect bed. However, this has been a very big game changer because it caused tons of issues when you were trying to level your bed manually if you had divots in the bed, and has really helped to improve reliability. There are also additional things that can be done for these thin beds like shimming, or there's the Nylon lock mod where you'll actually go around and manually adjust every single point of the bed using bolts and screws. This is quite common in the MK3S LDO style bed, which will sort of hardware correct, and it will at least limit the amount of warping that your bed is able to do because it's held in place by bolts and nylon lock nuts. Although it is still by no means a standard, linear rails on 3D printers are becoming more and more common. My Switchwire and the V-Minion both come standard with linear rails, and even the sub $200 King Room KP3S that I covered a couple of weeks ago has linear rails for both the X and Y axis. This really helps to ensure that the bed's motion is stiff and removes any possibility of slop as the bed is going back and forth during the printing process. One of the biggest upgrades bedslingers have gotten over the last couple of years here is Klipper firmware and input shaping. Input shaping might not be the answer to all things, but it really helps to minimize ringing while you are pushing those higher speeds, which is something that bedslingers can benefit greatly from. My buddy Albert over at 24/7 Printing has pushed 3D printers well beyond the bounds of anything I have ever done, especially when we are talking about their capabilities with speed. He recently created an excellent video where he takes 4 bedslingers running Marlin and clippers them. He makes no hardware changes and just tunes them in both the slicer and in Klipper firmware. The difference is pretty insane to see, and you may be very surprised at just how capable some of these low-cost bedslingers are. Links will be in the description over to that amazing video and his great channel. If you're interested in the things I cover here, you'll definitely be interested in his videos, so be sure to check them out and subscribe. There are way more options out there for bedslinger style 3D printers, both in shape, sizes, and configurations, and they are a fraction of the cost of pretty much all Core XY machines on the market. Most of the popular Core XY 3D printers out there are full kits, especially when we're talking things like Voron or RatRig, and that is quite an endeavor if we're talking about the building process and tuning process. If you do decide you want to go out and buy a Core XY 3D printer, the Bamboo X1 comes to mind, and there's probably a couple out there. In a lot of instances, you're going to be paying something like 4 times the price of a low-cost bedslinger printer. Core XY machines can print faster, but at 4 times the cost, if you're running something like a print farm, you're going to want 4 times the output, and in most instances, that just isn't the case. Also, from a business standpoint, putting all of your eggs in one basket is never a smart choice, and I'd rather have my prints spread across multiple machines than all on one machine in case something fails. Anyone that has been 3D printing for any extent of time will agree that even a expensive, reliable 3D printer will at some point go down. Another plus is that bedslingers are typically easier to work on. Everything is sort of open and very accessible, and unless you have something like the Switchwire, which has a Core XC motion system, it's just a much easier motion system for your average person to sort of look at and figure out where the issues might be lying. One thing you definitely will want to consider with a bedslinger though is space, and they will take up more space than a Core XY style printer because the bed is whipping back and forth. On something small like this Ender 3, it might not be that big of a deal, but on the Sovol SV04, which is an IDEX 3D printer with a 310 by 310 bed, that is a large mass moving back and forward. So depending on your setup, you'll need to make sure you have enough depth. I would be lying if I said that I've never put a bedslinger too close to the wall and had it home backwards just to have the thud, 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 thud sound, because it can't hit the end stop because the bed has backed up into my wall. For most, this is probably not a big deal, but again, if you're limited on space, it's certainly something to consider. From a hobbyist perspective and major enthusiast standpoint, if somebody was holding out a Core XY or a bedslinger style 3D printer and said pick one, I am definitely going to go with the Core XY style 3D printer. I love the motion system, I love the speed, and that they're easier and closed, and there's just a lot of positive with them. However, if I was running a print farm, I don't know that it actually makes the most sense from an investment standpoint, at least right now. Also, if I was buying my first 3D printer, I don't know that I would recommend a Core XY. The increased cost and difficulty with assembling and doing things like maintenance or tuning could be a recipe for a disaster for someone that just doesn't have any experience with 3D printing that might end up turning them off from the technology altogether. At the end of the day, 3D printing is not a one-shoe-fits-all, which is part of the reason why I love the technology so much, and the best choice for you might not be the best choice for someone else, and the main thing is what is the application and what is your end goal of the 3D printer that you're getting. If nothing else, my goal of this video was to basically show that yes, Bedslingers might be a fairly old tech or motion system dating back to 2009 with the Mendel. However, thanks to the many hardware improvements and definitely the firmware and slicer improvements, they are still incredibly viable 3D printers, and I don't see them going anywhere for quite some time. At this point, I am using bedslinger style 3D printers as often as I am using my Core XY 3D printers. They work well, they've been proven for a very, very long time, and for the most part, they get the job done, and I'm not, in a lot of instances, needing to crank out parts as quick as humanly possible. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are. Do you agree with my view on this? Is there additional points for pros or cons on bedslingers or Core XYs that maybe I didn't think of? Let me know. I always love hearing feedback, and these sort of discussion videos, I don't do them as often as I would like, but they always get me thinking and always get really good conversations going. On that note, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. We make a video every single week, so there's always fresh content coming your way. And if you do want to support the channel furthermore, I'll have links down below in the description over to our Patreon, where there are some really awesome rewards. Huge thank you to all of our existing Patreon supporters. I appreciate each and every one of you for allowing me to come back every single week and spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for you all to enjoy. On that note, this has been Daniel from ModBot. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Peace, guys!